course, the question comes, why now? Why at this time, at this juncture, when we are facing what was described as the biggest challenge in our history? We have an epidemic, a potential epidemic at the moment. It is in Pakistan, but worldwide it's a devastating pandemic and the worst in 100 years. And is this the right time, one may ask, for raising these questions? So what could possibly have prompted the federal government to be asking this question, and for this whole necessity of quote unquote review? What is there to review? What is the urgency that you want to set aside the pandemic response and you want to open a fresh Pandora's box, as if we didn't have enough on our hands? Now we want something so controversial and so full of and it's one of those things that's been settled. It's been settled 10 years ago. It's traveled a long way. Why on earth would the government be looking to review something that's now I'm one of those who thinks that this is not about federalism. This is not about power and the center province autonomy, but this is more about the money. In other words, this is more about NFC and less about the 18th Amendment, and that's just my hunch. And I want to share some of the apprehensions that that to me the government would have in mind at this point in time, and that is money to deal with this with the calamity and its effects. So there is a public health response, and of course that involves investing in healthcare. It involves spending money on testing and PPE equipment for doctors, but that's not, we are not talking of very huge sums of money for these things. Don't really cost so much, but it's more the management, the administration but where the effects, I said, the effects include the 1 month shutdown. That means 1 month of no economic activity, 1 month of no revenue collection, and 1 month of having to now dole out these so-called packages. Again, I'm saying so-called because these are not really cash packages. They are dressed to look like cash packages. These the 1.3 trillion rupee bailout. Just to give you one example, for instance, it includes a 200 billion rupee figure I was looking at for wheat procurement, and that is something we do every year anyways. So there's nothing unusual. It includes a very fat, hefty figure for the Benazir Income Support Program, which also is a going concern. It's a business as usual. There's nothing unusual about the government telling us that this is a part of a particular package. It's not, because we give it every month, we give it every year, and it's been going on for 10 years. So, however, the thing that is that could possibly be of concern to the government is that going forward, how are we going to sustain an economic lockdown and keep the population, especially the underprivileged, more vulnerable segments of the population, how do we keep them fed, nourished, and medically covered? We have to go back to understanding, where we've arrived at. We have to go back to 2001. And in 2001, Pakistan was a very poor country. And when I say it was a very poor country, I'm talking about the fact that 60% of the population lived in abject or near desperate poverty. we see that the 60% is a very high figure, by the way. This is just people that are able to just about eke out a living, and most of them not knowing where their next meal is going to come from. From 2001 to round about 2015, we see a very steep slope in poverty reduction. To give you an example, the poverty as measured in 2010, the poverty rate had reduced to 36%, and by 2015 it had further reduced to 24.8%. Don't hold me to these figures, but it's near about. These are ballparks, but it's a very consistent downward sloping curve showing a steady and a definite reduction in poverty numbers and in the proportion of the population living below the poverty line. Now 24%, and that pattern sustained till the transfer of power in 2018. What happened in 2010? Two major events. One was the global financial crisis was at its peak. It had broken out in 2008, 9 it had deepened, and the effects were still there. The second is a very major flood in Pakistan that year, and prompting the government of the time to launch a massive social protection exercise that was called the Benazir Income Support Program.